Okay, thank you, Chair. We're live on YouTube, so I'll hand it over to you. You're on mute, Chair. Chair, you're on mute.
That's good of me, isn't it? Right, let's start again. Welcome to the East Devon District Council virtual consultative scrutiny meeting today on the 7th of July. And I'm your chair, Councillor Mike Allen. I would like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via live streaming. You're very welcome. I just want to remind both members and public attending and watching that this council has delegated much of its decision-making power to our senior officers until the 31st of October 2022 due to concerns about COVID risk. And so because this meeting is being held remotely and on a consultative basis only, we will continue to adhere as closely as possible to the procedural rules detailed in our constitution. You can view the meeting online and it will be recorded, so bear that in mind throughout the meeting. And I just remind colleagues that be careful with language, and the code of conduct applies throughout the meeting. We reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant disrupting the meeting by whatever means. So please can you turn on any telephone devices off, and I just hope that my extension doesn't interrupt the meeting. If it does, I will do my best to stop that. As it's a consultative scrutiny meeting, it depends on internet connections and power supplies. So if we go blank and it breaks, then please bear with us while we try and get everything back together. But after 15 minutes, if we're not able to reconnect, we'll consider the meeting adjourned and come back at another date. So please check the committee page on the website for any details. And please make sure all microphones are muted when you're not speaking. This avoids background noise. And if you wouldn't mind keeping your points short and not repeating things, then that would help. We won't then get too late in the evening, and it's too beautiful an evening to waste. If you wish to comment, don't interrupt. Please just raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. Now, all councillors have been sent the agenda for the meeting, and any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do that by visiting our website, World Wide Web, eastdevon.gov.uk. We're going to start the meeting by doing the roll call of committee members present. So please unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you've confirmed you're present, please mute your microphone again. And after that, we'll get a vice chair for the meeting. Thank you ever so much. Okay, Sarah or Anita, whoever's roll calling.
It's me. Thank you, Chair. So Councillor Allen.
Yes, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Bonetta.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bruce.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Present, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Present, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Present, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Parr.
Yes, present, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ranger, I don't think he's in the meeting, but may be late joining us. And Councillor Whibley.
Present, and just to let you know, apologies due to a technical issue. I'll be audio only this evening. Cheers.
Thank you, and confirm that we are quorate tonight, Chair. Thank you.
Well, that's really excellent. So the first thing we need to do is to arrange for a vice chair. I didn't know Val was going to be late, so maybe Councillor Bonetta, you would like to step up?
If that is the wish of the committee, I'm more than happy to, yes.
Do we vote him in committee?
Agreed.
Fine. Okay. You are vice chair. for the evening. Hope you enjoy it, Jake. Right, if we go on to the agenda, I'm just trying to get there. And I've managed to mess it up immediately.
Have we gone past apologies, Chair?
No, we're just about to get to all the normal things, but I managed to put the agenda for today's meeting at the bottom of the pile, which is not the best place of doing it. Right, so was there anybody in regard of public, sorry, did we have any apologies, Sarah?
Would you like to do the agenda in start at item 1, public speaking, and then I have got apologies under item 3.
Oh, all right. Was there anybody in public speaking?
No, nobody registered.
No, I didn't think so. Do we are we happy with the minutes of the previous meeting on pages 3 to 7? Perhaps you could just indicate one way or the other on the normal system by raising a hand, a tick for yes.
Chair, that's 8 green ticks. So everyone in favour.
Brilliant, considering we were only having 7 people for it. So we're up to 8. Good. Fine. So apologies, please, Sarah.
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Davey, Councillor Hawkins, Councillor Rylance, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Gardner and Councillor Bailey.
Yes, there seems to be a large amount of COVID that's keeping people away, let alone anything else. So any declarations of interest? Remember, it's up to a councillor to come up with the declarations of interest. The guidance is available online, so it's up to each one of us to declare any items of interest. Please raise your hand if you have a declaration of interest. Can't see any declarations.
No, I see no hands, Chair, from committee members, but we need to ask, are there any other councillors in the meeting who want to declare an interest in any of the items on the agenda that may affect their ability to remain in the meeting, please?
Yep. So outside the committee members, are there any who have any declarations that would stop them talking to that particular item? Please raise your hand.
See no hands, Chair.
No, I didn't think we did. Great. So we'll carry on to matters of urgency, and there are no matters of urgency. And there are no confidential exempt items, thank heavens. So we can go on to any decisions made by Cabinet but called in by members, and I have not been notified of any. I don't know, Sarah, if you have, or Anita?
No, there are none.
No. Okay, fine. So rapidly coming to Sharon Church and George Whitlock, and I'm really looking forward to your summary of the poverty dashboard and the trends. So over to Sharon. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. So this evening we want to show you the poverty dashboard that we've been working on. Although it's still a work in progress, we have been making use of what it's already showing us, especially in the last 2 months. And we'll be able to show you some examples of that as we go through. But just to make you aware, this is not completely finished product yet. We are still continuing to add data and work on areas. Unfortunately, it has taken us longer than what we would like to due to all of the schemes we've had to deliver since COVID started and the amount of work we currently have with delivering new schemes to help with the cost of living crisis. So when we first started looking at building the dashboard, we wanted to build something that would gather data and outcomes through integrating with our systems and forms so that we could make more intelligent data-led decisions and ensure that our work was focused on our anti-poverty strategy. We also wanted to build something that would easily allow us to identify what's going on in the district at a glance, rather than having to compare lots of different data sets manually. And as we're also in the process of moving forms onto FirmStep, it's given us the opportunity to really build those forms to collect the right information for us to achieve all of that. So we originally started calling it the poverty dashboard, as it was more focused just on the benefits, the council tax and financial resilience data gathered by the revenues and benefits. But as the work on poverty has continued to grow and expand, with all the partnership working that's going on, we felt that the dashboard wasn't just about poverty any longer, and it could have much wider use across multiple services. So as you can see, we've renamed it the East Devon Social Resilience Dashboard. Now George is also here, and as he's the one who's been building the dashboard and getting all the data into it, he's the expert on moving around all of the different data sets. So he's going to show you some of those pages, how easy it is for us to break down the data. We are still working on building the public-facing dashboards that we can look at adding to our website, and that will be available for public use. And that will have less identifiable information on it. So we hope that that will be ready at some point towards the end of summer, autumn time. So the first page here you can see is the contents page, and it has space for the wording, where we can add detail about the data sets we've used, explanations and disclaimers. And as we continue to add more stuff to the dashboard, we'll be looking to move some of that to a separate page. So at present, on the right hand side, we've got our council tax arrears and council tax reduction caseload. We've got the housing benefit caseload, household support fund and financial resilience data, and also the energy performance certificate register all feeding in. We also have other data sets sat in the background, like the council tenant rent arrears, and we've got Department for Works and Pensions and Office for National Statistic data in there. So some of the data sets that we have got feeding in, they will become pages on their own as we continue with development, and all that data captured is expanded on. Now we update the data sets on the 1st of each month, so that will show what the situation is at that fixed point of time. But we do have the ability to look back at previous months as well, so that means we can track the position over time. The data is therefore quite fluid, and as we gather more over future months, we'll be able to start analysing trends and track what effect the work going on in all the different teams has on the numbers. So we are still quite early on in our journey of building this and learning what we want and need to report on, and we're still working on building reports, making sure we're only gathering the relevant data, because we know there's so much available. We want to make sure we're using the right data for our needs, and we also have areas where we're still refining data, as we need to ensure it's accurate, of course. And the other thing we need to consider is that some of the external data sets give us a different level of detail than what we have access to internally. So we need to understand how that's going to build in and complement what we have. An example of that would be Department for Works and Pensions Stat Explore data. It doesn't give us individual household income breakdown at the same level as our internal data does, but it is useful for high level information. So this page is the key headlines. As you can see, it's split into the 4 areas. We've got financial, housing, employment and health, and each area has key headlines that are pulled out from the individual data sets. And those key headlines can be changed as we add more data sets in, or if we want to look at a specific outcome or area. And right in the middle of the page, we've got the numbers of people living in either relative or absolute poverty in the district. Now, those numbers in the middle aren't the true amount at the moment because we've not yet been able to add in our passported benefit cases. And that's because for benefit purposes, we only need to know that the person's on a passported benefit, such as income support. We don't get to know the details of their actual income. And therefore, at the moment, we're still not confident that we can accurately calculate their actual income. So we're doing further work on that so we can add those numbers in, but we do expect there will be some rise on those. Now, the more people that work through us directly through the financial resilience team or other teams that collecting income and expenditure, the more accurate those figures will become, and we can really start to be confident, much more confident that the data is correct and accurate. So we've also added those at risk of falling into either relative or absolute poverty by a £10 or £5 bracket, so that we can start to also understand the numbers of those at risk of falling into poverty, where they are, and potentially target preventative work at those groups of people. So under some of the main headlines, so we've got, you can see under financial, that budgeting is currently the highest root cause of poverty or hardship. We've got how many households have been financially supported by one or more of our discretionary funds, and the average debt of those needing extra financial resilience work. Under health, we can see that nearly 41% of residents requesting extra financial support are disabled. And that's an example of where the dashboard has helped develop our approach and policies. So when we designed our discretionary council tax energy rebate scheme, because we knew that there were households where there's a carer or a disabled person resident in the property, and that group probably needs extra financial support. So we knew we had to target that specific group. And it did result in us having a more complicated scheme than perhaps some other local authorities had, but it did ensure that we provided that extra support to the group that the data told us needed it the most. And we can see there that mental health is the second highest root cause of poverty, and physical health is the third. And again, that's because they're the second and third highest root causes of poverty and hardship. We've been working on building our partnerships out in the community with those groups that can help residents with the issues that they're facing. So, for example, we work with PCN teams now, contact GPs, and the Devon County Council's enabling team, because they all provide different services that can really help with those root causes. So because there is an awful lot of data in the dashboard, we wanted to focus on a couple of areas for you, and hopefully you'll be able to see how useful all this data is, and it's going to continue to be. So I'm going to hand you over to George, who's going to go through a bit more of that with you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Good evening, everyone. So yeah, I'm going to quickly run through some of the pages that we have and some of the data that we currently have available to us. One thing we've recently added to the dashboard on this page is that we've now got the ability to go back through time to look at these key headlines over time. So if I hover over the households currently receiving financial resilience support, we can see that over the last 5 months that we've been collecting this data, we've seen a constant increase in those households that are receiving financial support. we've now got this ability to track over time, so we can have a look at those disabled households, as Sharon mentioned. Over the last 5 months, that's continued to stay about 40% of our caseload of our financial resilience work is with disabled households, and same with carers. It stayed fairly consistent over the last few months. Down in the bottom right here, we've got a bit of information about employment, and we've seen that very recently, as we moved over to the new financial year, we had as we received the new financial year information for claimants, we could see that there was an increase in the numbers that were earning. However, even though we've seen that more people have started to go back into work, though a lot of those households are still living within the relative and absolute poverty levels. So back in March, 14% of our caseload that we identified as being in poverty were in employment, whereas now we're currently at 21.3%. So that identifies that. So if I move on to one of the other pages that we have available to us, this is our interactive timeline. There's quite a lot of data on here at the moment, but we've got the ability on here to start having a look at each of our caseloads over time. So those caseloads include our council tax reduction caseload, our housing benefit caseload, as well as poverty levels over time, alongside the DWP data. So the DWP data includes universal credit, the number of unemployed households in receipt of unemployment benefits, as well as employment and support allowance, and attendance allowance and things like that, that we might not necessarily have the level of information on because they might not be on our caseload. But on here, we've now got the ability to directly compare different caseloads over time. So if we have a look at, here we go. So if we have a look at housing benefit, universal credit and CTR, we can see on here we've got a couple of lines which identify key points in time. So the first line here is back in July of 2018, when East Devon started to migrate housing benefit cases onto universal credit. And then we've also got lines on here which identify the different lockdowns that we had, which obviously had different support schemes for each of those. And we can see that at lockdown 1, we had a very large increase in universal credit cases, and also our council tax reduction caseload rose significantly over that time. And our council tax reduction caseload has stayed fairly high even after the pandemic has phased out a little bit. But we've also, I've just added on here, unemployment benefits. So we can see here that households in receipt of unemployment benefits at the bottom down here, they've decreased after the pandemic. However, as mentioned, our council tax reduction caseload and the universal credit caseload has stayed high, which identifies that even though people are working their way back into work, they are still struggling financially. There is a slight discrepancy here between when we've got the universal credit caseload and the unemployment caseload. That is because that data is from the DWP, and they are always a couple of months behind on providing data, whereas our individual data sets, we've got accurate as of the 1st of July, which was the last time this dashboard was updated. So that's what we can see on the interactive timeline. But we've also got an interactive map where we can start having a look at our different caseloads geographically across the district, so we can start to identify are there any key areas standing out above other things. So we can have a look at the caseload in absolute poverty, we can have a look at rural versus urban areas, and we can directly compare our caseloads. So if we have a look at absolute poverty and council tax arrears, this will directly show any specific areas where there are households with council tax arrears and absolute poverty. But on here, we've also got the ability to go down to parish and ward levels, which again helps us identify any key areas which could lead to targeted support in the future. So that's what we've got on the interactive map. I'm going to go through a couple of the individual pages that we have available to us. So if we move on to our council tax arrears page, this goes through council tax arrears month on month, and currently as of the 1st of July, 5.2% of our banded properties are in receipt of council tax arrears, have council tax arrears, and that's nearly 1,400, right, it's just over 1,400 council tax reduction claims. And we can start to see where these arrears are by which council tax bands they're in, but also identifying particular wards or particular parishes that might have higher levels than others. Because all of our data sets, we can analyse them together. We can have a look at arrears by those cases that are currently receiving financial support, those cases identified as in poverty or not in poverty, as well as those cases that might be receiving council tax reduction or housing benefit. One of the recent introductions to the dashboard is we've now got information for the energy performance certificates, especially with the growing concerns around energy costs. We felt that this was something really important to include on here. And we can directly have a look at, so currently we've got 48,000 EPC certificates within East Devon, within the EPC database. And we can see that just under 75% had a potential improvement that could be made to the property when that EPC was completed, which is a very high amount. And because of that, we can have a look at those cases that we've identified as in poverty, and we can see that 63% of those that we have EPC information on that live in poverty have a potential band improvement on their EPC, which could, if the change is made, reduce those energy bills, which is something that we want to start working on with our financial resilience teams and other partnership working, is try and support those customers to try and help make those potential changes, which could help them financially into the future. So yeah, we can currently see that, if I just take that filter off, yeah, so the EPCs that we have, most of them are around the energy band Ds, but down in the bottom left here, this looks at those potential band changes. So the biggest amount of properties could potentially move from a band D to a band C, but we've also got a few there that can move from a band D to a band B. And that energy performance database is updated every couple of months. So we keep that information as up to date as we can. And as I said, it directly links into our other caseloads. Again, we can look at all of this down to a particular parish, particular ward, particular towns, and we can have a look at rural versus urban areas as well. So this could help identify any key areas that might need that bit more targeted work as well. And then alongside that, we've also got a page on here which kind of summarizes those households in poverty, types of wards, types of parishes that they are, the split between working age and elderly, as well as those energy bands that they're in. So we can see that of those households living in poverty, majority of them are living in banded D energy rated properties. And as we saw, a lot of those banded D properties had a potential energy band improvement. So that's where we want to start targeting the work. Sorry, the phone's just ringing. Turn that off. Yeah, so we've got quite a few band changes there that we could do, and we've got interactive maps. Sorry. Bear with me. There we go. It should be quiet now. And as again, we also have our council tax bands there, so we can see of those living in poverty, which council tax bands are they in. So they are in the bands A and band B properties as well. So that's what we've got on there. So if I pass back to you, Sharon, if you could pick up on your next few points.
Great, thank you. So I think, as George has shown you, there's a huge amount of information there available to us. And as explained earlier, we really want to make use of all of that to help with designing our policies and our working practices, and looking at what organisations and agencies we need to work with to help solve some of those underlying issues that our residents are facing. And from the financial resilience work we've been doing, we've been able to feed into Devon County and the Household Support Fund work. We worked as part of a Team Devon approach on that. And there was a proposal initially to pay all those on guaranteed credit and council tax reduction and award from the Household Support Fund. And we were able to show why we thought all pensionable age residents on council tax reduction should receive some help, not just those on guaranteed credit. So that's what Team Devon Group's gone with. So all pensionable age residents on CTR are now receiving a payment of £90 out of the Household Support Fund. It's also allowed us to easily get data for external partners that we're working with without having to wait for reports and analyse a whole heap of data. Working with some of the local schools. One of the voluntary organisations in Sidmouth approached us for help planning a community response at Christmas. We were able to give them potential numbers and areas of where they could focus that support on. And their household makeup, and continuing to work in partnership with them. We've also been showing the dashboard and the work we're doing around poverty as a council with the Local Government Association, and have been involved in some of their workshops. So going forward, we are continuing to work on adding further data sets in and identifying more partners that we need to work with. We're also continuing using that data to drive changes to our policies and working practices whenever it's needed. And we'll also be looking to bring in the vulnerable debt toolkit in revenues and benefits. Hopefully over the autumn. We did want to do it a bit earlier, but events have overtaken us a bit. So alongside the vulnerable debt toolkit, we want to expand the use of the standard financial statement that the financial resilience team already use that feeds into this dashboard. I want to expand that out to other departments, so our overpayments and our council tax team, so that much more data is coming in, much more accurate data. And that will also allow for a once-only approach for residents, because with their permission we can share that with debt agencies. It's a standard statement that other agencies accept. And we will just continue to build up a more accurate picture of what's happening in the district, look at how we can all work together really to address the issues in the right way. So hopefully that's given you all some insight into what we're doing and how the dashboard can be used to help support the anti-poverty policy and the work that we're all doing. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Sharon, that, is just stunning. And I just want to thank you and George for the work that you've been pulling together, and it's excellent to have such growing insight into how we can target the funds that we have and bring in other proposals and applications for support that are helping people. What is horrifying is there's still 3,500 homes where they are in poverty to some degree, and obviously everything that we can do in East Devon we want to do, and you're doing a lot of it. Thank you for that. I think that I have a whole list of people, so I'll start with those outside the scrutiny committee. Remember to be brief, otherwise we'll be here till midnight at this rate. And so I'll go first of all with Jack Rowlands and then Paul Miller.
Thank you, Chair. You've stolen my thunder a little bit because I did want to give huge thanks to Sharon and George for the work that they've done on this. It's so essential that we have this type of data to be able to target the help that we can give. And Sharon touched on one example, and I'll just mention it again because it fell within my finance portfolio, was the council tax energy rebate discretionary scheme, where we had to put forward a policy of how we were going to deal with that. And this data really helped to focus where we could focus that particular scheme and be proactive to write out to applicants this month to give them the help. So absolutely essential that we had this data, and I'd like to applaud what's been done on this. I'm just wondering, because of George's work on this, which has been done totally in-house, whether we've got an opportunity to actually sell this to other authorities, because we must be ahead of the game, I would imagine, with some other adjoining authorities on this subject. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to market this to other authorities.
Thank you very much, Jack. I did suggest to John Golding some time back that it was so good we really ought to be offering to sell it, but you see George keeps developing it, so we've got to be sure of what the product is first. So thank you very much for the comments. On to Paul Miller, Councillor Paul Miller.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. I don't know what your definition of brief is, but I will do my best. And you know, I'm sorry you can't see me on the screen, but I'm always glad you can't, because it's just so shocking, some of these figures. The fact that at least 1,980 number of households living in absolute poverty within our district, nearly as many as those living in relative poverty. And I just think how distressing, how shaming, and what a damning indictment on the current government, which has completely lost control of the economy with prices rising faster than wages. That's the cause. And that's what the analysis shows. And we should probably be calling it the East Devon Social Survival Dashboard. So it proves what dreadful impact the cost of living crisis has had. And most importantly, the lack of intervention from a government which has now collapsed in a psychodrama. And I want to make this point now. The brass neck of our local MP to blame councillors from making other difficult decisions, because that is where this kind of revenue is going, on these vital financial interventions to try to alleviate relative and absolute poverty. And I think councillors from all sides need to accept that. My question to the officers who have created an absolutely fantastic dashboard is, can councillors use this dashboard? Because I would love to use this myself to look into some of the statistics in my own ward, because I think this is really interesting and really will assist councillors' role in their local areas, knowing where poverty exists and understanding our wards better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I'm not entirely sure that the politics of blaming everything on the government is accurate, since right across Europe and America, and in fact the whole world,
it's a lot worse here, Chair.
We're all in trouble. But what we're trying to do here in this committee is be constructive. And
I thought I asked a constructive question.
Please don't keep interrupting me. We're trying to find solutions and ideas, and so would Sharon or Councillor Ledger, I think he may be here, like to comment on whether or not councillors can have some kind of access?
Yeah, so we are looking at making a more simplified version. We won't be able to give the full access because there is identifiable information in the back office, which is what we've shown you. But the public-facing dashboard, which we'll be developing, there will be stuff, and that will be available. And also councillors will be able to come to us for more detailed information, but because of the GDPR, we have to, and it's lots of different data, we have to kind of consider each thing that we release beyond the public. So that's why the public facing bit hasn't quite been finished yet, because we still have to work through what we can make publicly available. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, thank you, Sharon. I certainly hope that Councillor Ledger will look at it in the next poverty forum that's planned, I believe, in September. We could probably come back and recommend that. Councillor Jeff Young, you've come in and out, so you were next on the list.
Thank you, Chair. It's brilliant to see technology being used to benefit poverty. Now, I remember computers when they were just silly games or dirty great big monsters in big rooms with air conditioning. So, no, it's wonderful to see this technology being used for the benefit of people that need this help. Is this at the moment just a Strata stroke East Devon, or is it Exeter and Timbridge involved in this, seeing it's a Strata thing? And that's all the other questions have been answered now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Perhaps Sharon, you could explain.
Yeah, it's just East Devon, and it's George is working directly for Revs and Bens, so it is Revs and Bens developed, not Strata have helped with some of the background data, I think, in the data warehouses. George would be better able to explain the technicalities of where all the data goes, but George mainly has developed this under Revs and Bens and Libby Jarrett's service. So.
Right, thank you very much. Next person in, I think, is Megan Armstrong. Megan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Was behind all this in the first place with me. So off
yeah, there's 2 or 3 things I wanted to mention, and the three speakers we've had, Councillor Rowland, Miller, and the latest one, Councillor Young. These are all things that have been ongoing for quite some time in the Poverty Working Panel. So the idea, as the Chair said, of possibly selling George's really excellent work externally has always been on the back burner, and it's something that we hopefully will think about in future. And Councillor Miller, the idea of accessing the dashboard for members in their wards, that's also been mentioned before. But it's good for you to keep raising that, because that is important and it would be a useful tool for members if they needed it. And also the Councillor Young's comment about it being connected with Strata. This basically was all set up, as far as I understand it, came directly from the Poverty Working Panel work. And we needed to be able to do something and show something that made it quite clear what was happening in the district, and that's why George's work and Sharon's work has been so brilliantly done. And thank you to them both for all of that. What I was concerned about was this idea that we haven't had a poverty working panel now since the 21st of March. And I know that a couple have been cancelled. When I was chair, I had to cancel one and change it. But since Councillor Ledger's been chair, we've had 2 missing meetings. The next one was due on the 18th of July. And it just really concerns me because of as Councillor Miller's already pointed out, the the real difficulty that people are in at the moment. And I think it's just something that we should be, the poverty working panel should be, hopefully, a really high priority for the district. And it always has been up until now, as far as I'm concerned. And it just worries me that meetings are being cancelled. So I wonder if Councillor Ledger can explain, if he's still in the meeting, I think he probably is, why that meeting was cancelled for the 18th of July. Because this could have been part of that meeting. This presentation of the summary of the poverty dashboard could have been part of that meeting. And as it would have been advertised as a poverty working panel and a full agenda would have gone out, people would have been expecting it and would have been able to diarise it and attend that meeting. So it just worries me. And I just wonder, first of all, why that meeting on the 18th of July was cancelled, and also what plans there are for the meeting in September, which will be 6 months then since the last meeting was held. So I just really have some concerns there, and I'd like to be reassured that things are in hand. I know the officers are working like mad behind the scenes, as they always do. But I just think there are things that the poverty panel could be doing. We could be getting in speakers, we could be exploring certain issues in more detail. And I just would like to see that happening sooner rather than later. So thank you for that, Chair.
Thanks very much, Megan. Councillor Dan Ledger, you want to comment?
Yeah, I can do, Chair. There's no problem at all. The reason it didn't come through in July was the fact that there wasn't enough business to come through. There wasn't enough time for officers to write the necessary reports to have a full agenda. We already knew that this was going to be on the Scrutiny Committee agenda. So looking at the actual poverty policy that we've got that we're going to look against, we're asking our service leads to feed into that and mark off where we are at with the policy. It just wasn't, there wasn't enough time for officers to feed into that at that point. So I'd rather come to council with a full report and a full agenda rather than come a bit piecemeal and something that isn't fully comprehensible. Officers agreed with that, and that's why we've moved it to September.
Could I just come back on
Megan briefly?
Just yeah. Well, it's that was the point I was making, that it's come to this meeting. This could have gone to the poverty panel meeting in July, and there are things you don't have to have written reports all the time. At the poverty working panel, it can be verbal reports, just updates on what's going on, and it gives members an opportunity to discuss what the members want to do. You don't necessarily have to have a lot of officers there to run a successful, I'm sorry, I'm teaching grandmother to suck eggs probably, but you know, in my experience, it's the members who are important in that panel to receive information if and as and when necessary, but then for the members to act on anything extra that they think they should be doing separate to that. So I won't say any more now. Thank you, Chair.
That's your key point there, Megan, as and when necessary. And I didn't feel that it was necessary until the September, so we had a full amount of information come to members. Thank you.
Just to correct one point, I only put this onto the agenda when the poverty panel, poverty forum had been cancelled. So I just want to be clear. Next seems to be everybody outside the committee has had a say. So going to Helen Parr, please. Councillor Helen Parr.
Thank you. Where can I find the definition of absolute and relative poverty?
Okay, Sharon.
Yeah. So on the dashboard, we have put that onto the dashboard. It's on that main page with the explanations, but that it is available online. So you've got Joseph Roundtree has it available on their website. We use the before housing costs because we couldn't work out the after housing costs because of the data set we held. So we will make sure that that's available on the website to explain what the levels are, but it is available also online on different charitable organisations.
Thank you very much. Is that okay, Helen? You finished? Yep. Okay, fine. Thank you. On to David Key, Councillor David Key.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, those two people, Sharon and George, must be highly commended for an absolute excellent report. What I would like to ask them is, in actual fact, I mean, we're looking at nearly 2,000 that are actually in dire poverty. Have they, I mean, it may be difficult to ascertain, but what sort of age range are those people that are actually in that nearly 2,000 number? What would they cover? Is it a complete age range, or is it a particular age that has that?
I don't know if George or Sharon could answer that easily.
Yes, George, would you like to, or would you like me to? Yeah.
I can. At the moment, we can see because our caseload is currently split between working age and pension age. We can see that there are households in poverty, working age and pension age, but that is something that we could explore to give more defined age brackets to see if there are any particular brackets that are experiencing more levels than others.
Yes, thank you. It's what, you know, where is the greatest numbers? That's what I would like to know. Thank you.
Well, perhaps you can drop us all an answer after the meeting, because Sharon, I did ask yourself and George if you could leave us with some information afterwards. And those trends, particularly since March, there's been a huge jump in some of those things. And even though people have started working more, they haven't got out of the poverty bracket. So we need a bit of exploration of those things. Thank you very much, Councillor Key. We'll go to Councillor Bonetta.
Thank you, Chair. First off, I just want to say a massive thank you to Sharon and George. You've done some absolutely superb work here for the council, and I think we should all be really proud of what you've done. But actually, I think you should both really be very proud of what you've done. This is sort of groundbreaking for the area that we're in, and I don't think that should really go amiss. I think we're really sort of beating the curve here in terms of getting the data that we need. I must agree with the point about councillors being able to see this. I think it would be very useful, especially in terms of casework loading for us, so we know where we can direct people and sort of where our focuses should lie. However, I can't help but think that there are certain community groups that may also be able to benefit from this. I know obviously there are massive GDPR issues as with giving data to councillors about sort of identifiable sort of data and GDPR issues surrounding data protection and everything about council tenants and residents of the district, etc. However, would it be at all possible, maybe not to make it fully accessible, but on demand, to have some sort of statistics available, for example, for local food banks, for local health charities, etc., to use to pinpoint where they can actually work and help the most? I think that would be sort of really key in exploring and expanding what our council is already offering, especially with the work that Victoria is doing in terms of community food outreach as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jake. That's very kind, and some very good points there. We'll come back to any suggestions or proposals in a minute, and you may like to bring a recommendation. Councillor Jamie Kemp, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have two very, very quick questions. You say that the data is imported every month into the system. Can I just ask how it's imported to the dashboard and the time required to do that? Is it automatic or does it require people to do it? Also, is there a graph or a chart that compares the EPCs against council tax band? I saw that there was one regarding the age of properties and EPCs. Is it on council tax band? And finally, I note that the number one justification root cause for poverty was budgeting, and second was mental health, and then third physical health. How do we justify budgeting? That seems to be a rather vague name. You know, what can we do about it? Thank you.
Yeah, it does seem there's a lot of questions here, and thank you, Jamie, for that. And it's very insightful. Sharon, do you want to come back to answer any of those questions?
Yeah, I can answer the budgeting, but I'll need to leave George to answer the import, the technical data. So in terms of the budgeting, what we look at is when the financial resilience officers are doing their work, they complete a very in-depth assessment and they identify the root cause after all of the work that they've done with a person, and that will involve talking to them about a lot of their circumstances, what they're struggling with, to get right to that root cause, because people will just approach us saying, I can't afford to eat. And as we know, that's a symptom of the poverty. It's not actual reason for it. Sometimes there's often stuff going on. Sometimes it's numerous things going on. So what we've tried to do is really identify those underlying issues and what is the root cause of it right at the bottom of it. And in terms, what we mean by budgeting is that people don't know how to budget their money to make it through the month. For all sorts of reasons. Some don't know how to do it, others don't have enough money to budget on. And what we've found, in terms of money coming in, we've classified that as another root cause. So it is more about people not being able to budget the money that they've got. So we're looking at working with citizens' advice. And again, I think a bit of this was discussed in the poverty panels. So working with Citizens Advice, East Devon, and they are looking at putting a budgeting course together. It was almost ready until the Ukraine crisis hit, and they had to take over doing visits. So we are still not quite ready for that to be out in for the public to use. But it's more of an in-depth course rather than just doing a budget with someone. They've put together a course where people can learn how to budget and know how to do that every single month. So hopefully that's explained that a bit more. George, do you want to do the technical part?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, in terms of time it takes every month, I would say currently about 70% of the monthly update is done completely automatically. We get reports that run on a monthly basis out of our academy system, which directly import into this. The work that does need to be done manually at the moment is when any of our external databases are updated. So if the DWP updates their data or the EPC certificates update, that is a manual process at the moment to get that data, but there potentially is the ability to directly link into the DWP Stat Explore system in the future. So that's how long it currently takes.
Okay. Well, I think we've had a very technical discussion and also an extremely exciting discussion on this. I would ask that we have a look now at what we want to recommend to happen. And I'm going to make an exception because since Councillor Maddie Chapman hasn't had a chance to talk yet, I'm just going to ask her to say something, and then I'll come back for the committee to make any recommendations. So over to Maddie Chapman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sharon and George. Sharon mentioned citizens' advice, and I know they've been working very hard, but we do have the school holidays coming up, and that is always a red flag, I understand, for citizens' advice, because that is where a lot of the residents go. Now, citizens' advice, we did know on the poverty working panel, they had to put in new phone lines, etc., etc. And I'm just wondering, with the shocking poverty line that we've got, whether citizens' advice have enough room, enough telephones, etc. And I'm just wondering what we're thinking about this, because the town hall, obviously, in Exmouth has got a lot of room. And if citizens' advice needs to expand, they could expand, I feel sure, to the town hall. I don't know how they're coping at the moment, because obviously I haven't been down there, but maybe Sharon or George could let us know. But holiday times, families do find it difficult with all the children at home, buying ice creams and things like that. It gets a bit expensive for families that are on the poverty line. And I just want to make sure that citizens' advice are fine and can cope with the workload. If Sharon or George could let us know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Maddie. What I'd like to do now, because there's been a lot of good discussion, is to come up with any recommendations. So does anybody have any recommendations as a result of this discussion, please? You are allowed to raise a hand or wave at me or come back with some superb ideas. Remember, we're critical friends, so we want to make sure that something happens. Jake Bonetta.
Thank you, Chair. On the basis that obviously I've heard through the comments that Sharon and George have obviously made that work is already in progress to make it accessible to councillors. I would like to make a proposal on the point that I made prior, which is that we explore options to give community groups in the poverty sector access to portions of this data to improve their works in their communities.
Okay, is there any seconder for that? Thank you, Helen. Helen Parr, want to talk?
Chairman, I'd also like to add our thanks to Sharon and George for this excellent work.
Okay, thank you. So let's come to a vote. Are all those in favour of that particular suggestion that we should enable access not only from councillors but also to local action voluntary groups? Could you please show by your green tick, please? Sarah, I'm stealing your thunder, so you probably better take that.
That's fine. We have 7 green ticks showing in favour, Chair.
Oh, well, please add mine. And
8 then, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd love to spend a lot more time on this particular topic because it's so rich. I don't want to hold up a discussion from Joe Fellows, who is hovering there in the background to talk about our internal people. So George, Sharon, so much thanks for everything that you're doing. You know we're behind you and we really want to help every way we can with this poverty agenda. Thank you. Good. Then let's move to Joe and looking at the internal staffing situation.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I've met all of you virtually or otherwise since I joined the council. So Joe Fellows, I'm the HR manager. I joined East Devon almost a year ago now. It's flown by, in last August, having joined from working in HR at Devon County Council. And I'm here today to sort of talk through some of the data that I provide to Personnel Committee. And I agreed with the Personnel Committee, obviously, when I joined in August, I think it was our second meeting that I attended back in November last year. I provided them with some proposals around improving the people data or workforce data reporting that I provide to them, really to help to support them in making policy decisions, as we go forward around sort of HR policies and so on, and also to provide them with an overview of workforce matters going forward. And the report that you see in the pack today are the two versions of the report. So basically it's two reports that I provide in agreement with the committee. The first is an annual report, which is on a range of HR topics, including things like learning development, employee relations, sort of casework, disciplinaries, grievances, that sort of thing, and equality and diversity. And this one built on what I understand was a previous annual workforce report that I believe was previously shared with members prior to the introduction of the Personnel Committee. But I've built on that and added some additional areas in there. And you can see, as I say in the pack, that the latest one, which is for the 2021-22 financial year, is in the pack from page 10 to 22. The second report, which is the more frequent report, is the one that goes to each Personnel Committee meeting. And that really picks out the key data for us at the moment, the things that we really, from a workforce perspective, we need to think about and keep an eye on, as we go forward. And obviously vacancies and turnover are key things for us, particularly at the moment in light of the current climate. It goes, as I say, to every committee meeting, and you can see, as again, the latest report up to the 31st of May is included in the pack from pages 25 to 29. And the idea is that the people data reports that go to Personnel Committee aim to complement what I know you already received through scrutiny with regard to workforce-related performance indicators that I understand are reported to you quarterly. It's just worth bearing in mind that sometimes the figures between the two different versions of the report might be slightly different, and that's just because of the timing of the data. But what I am trying to do, working with Joe Avery, who produces the quarterly performance indicator data, is just making sure that we make the links between the two, so that if you see the sickness absence data, for example, in the quarterly reports that come to you, then where to go if you wanted to get sort of more detail in terms of what is sent to Personnel Committee. And so we'll be including that in the explanatory notes of that report going forward. It's very much work in progress. Nowhere near as whizzy as what you've just been looking at in terms of the anti-poverty strategy dashboard. Certainly that's somewhere where I would like to go with this. I've used sort of similar dashboards at Devon County Council for workforce data, so that's certainly something on my radar that we would want to develop over time. And also in terms of the content of the data, so for example, vacancy data is very new for us in terms of reporting. My team have worked really hard the latter part of this year and into early last year and into early this year to pull that information together out of our HR system. We haven't reported on that before, and still need some sort of tweaks and so on. So very much work in progress, but I hope it's a helpful starting point, to give us all more information on our workforce and the key things we need to consider. But also I want to be able to use it going forward to help determine the impact of various interventions that we may be putting in place. So, for example, Work Smart, our post-pandemic working arrangements that we're introducing, and the reward review that we're hoping to, that we'll be looking to implement later on this year. So, those things, what impact does that have on recruitment, retention, and so on? So the data will help us with that. I'm happy to answer, obviously, any questions. I see hands going up as we speak, but I thought maybe helpful just to pick out 3 areas that I thought might be of particular interest to you, and then obviously if there's other things we could, happy to answer questions. So the first one is obviously vacancies and data. It's high on all of our radars in terms of the impact this is having on the organisation and our ability to deliver important services. You'll see from the data, so page 26, which is the data Since March, we've had an increase. We had 47 vacancies at the end of March this year. It's now, as at the end of May, 58 vacancies. And if you think we've got a headcount of around 505 or so staff, that's about 10% of our headcount of vacancies at the moment. So that is a real issue for us. As I say, it's a new reporting area for us, so we haven't got trends, but we all know, you know, anecdotally from around the organisation, but also obviously more widely, this is a major issue for us as a council, but also for all employers at the moment. You know, with the levels of vacancies in the wider economy, nationally and locally, is, you know, it's an ongoing issue for all of us. And obviously turnover, you know, links with that. We have got higher turnover figures. You can see on page 13 that voluntary turnover at the end of the financial year 2021-22 was 9.91, and based on our turnover rate as at you know, since April, we're projecting a turnover rate of about 14% by the end of this financial year, which is, that's shown on page 27. So it is an issue, you know, the two things linked together, you know, and we need to do all that we can, obviously, to try and mitigate against that. It's really difficult to get up-to-date benchmarking data as well, because things are moving so quickly. But as I say, we all know that it's an issue. And things like the reward review that we're now working through, Personnel Committee agreed, you know, for us to take forward the design proposals around a new pay and grading structure. And I'm now with my team working on the detail of that in terms of the impact assessment, and then, you know, we'll be moving on to collective consultation with Unison later on this summer, with hopefully the aim, if all goes well and everything's agreed, that we'll be implementing in October. So that will be a key part of the work, you know, that we're doing. But obviously pay is only one factor that we need to look at in terms of recruitment and retention. In terms of sickness, we remain above our long-standing target of 8.5 working days lost per annum. At the end of the last financial year, it was at 9.56 days, which is on page 18. And the latest day, as of May, we were about 0.78 days lost per month, which is slightly down on the same time last year, but not a huge amount. And I think, you know, we will see absence levels at a similar level for this financial year. We have also seen an increase in COVID absence, and actually the June data, which obviously isn't in the pack, but you know, I'm hearing a lot of COVID cases across the council at the moment. As of the end of June, we had 14 staff off, which was the same number as we had in April, but the period of time that they were off was actually slightly longer. I think in April it was about an average of 4 days per person. When those who've been off during June, it's about a week, just over a week's worth on average that they've been off. So that is an issue, and it's obviously compounding our recruitment and retention issues as well. Having said that, the COVID cases, you know, that's the COVID cases where people have been absent through sickness. I do know anecdotally there's a lot of staff, I haven't got the figures because we don't report on that, but I do know that a lot of staff have tested positive for COVID, but are being able to continue to work, you know, by working at home. So I think, you know, that without our work smart arrangements, our absence statistics around COVID related absence would be a lot higher. In terms of the sort of reasons for absence, as well, obviously in addition to COVID, short-term absence, as you can see in the pack, it's you know, has gone back to sort of pre-pandemic levels. So page 19, there's some analysis there. I think we were finding, you know, things like colds and flu, that sort of thing, had reduced when people were social distancing, you know, not leaving their homes as much and so on. Obviously, we're now seeing things get returning to sort of normal types of levels for short-term absence. And for medium and long-term absence, personal stress and anxiety remains one of the key reasons for absence. And obviously, we continue to robustly manage sickness absence in line with our policy. And, you know, we can see again through the page 21, we've got the occupational health referral rates for the last financial year. You know, there's been an increase from 29 rates the previous year to 47 referrals to occupational health. So I think that, you know, that is evidence that we are taking steps to robustly manage and support. Obviously, occupational health is, managing, but also identifying what support we can offer to staff. And that is obviously alongside our employee assistance offer, so things like counselling and so on, and our wider Happy Healthy Here staff wellbeing offer, where we offer a range of different things. And then finally, I just wanted to mention the workforce profile. You'll see again in the annual report, pages 22 to 24, we've included a range of equality and diversity data. My understanding is that previously we just reported on age, and that obviously is key. And our current average age of the workforce is 49. So, again, adding to our recruitment and retention issues, we've got this sort of ticking time bomb of people getting older, and the need to succession planning and so on. And with Personnel Committee back in September, a month in after I'd started, one of the priorities that I agreed with them is that we will do some work which I've been calling Grow Our Own. So, that's about mitigating longer term against recruitment and retention issues and helping the succession plan. So that's things like apprenticeships, how we engage with schools and local schools and colleges to bring young people into the council, selling the benefits, the wide range of jobs we've got, providing career pathways through the council, those sorts of things. With Work Smart and the reward review, that's taking longer than I hoped to get off the ground, but I have got a bit of a blueprint. Part of my role at Devon County Council, I was the apprenticeship lead for the council, and I've basically established the apprenticeship arrangements at the council, which are now award-winning with lots of young people joining Devon County Council. So I've got a bit of a blueprint there that I want to replicate here at East Devon, so lots of opportunities there. And as I say, I've also included other equality and diversity characteristics in the data. We're doing a big push at the moment with staff to get them to complete that information because we haven't got a full picture. And obviously, if I've got that information, that will help me then to inform further work around equality and diversity issues further down the line. So I hope that's helpful as a snapshot, and obviously very happy to take any other questions.
It's more of a snapshot. It's a gallop. And thank you for covering the ground so superbly. The key issue with our employment is really, for me, that I think we've got 120 people over 55. We've got a real dearth of young people. We need those apprenticeships and young recruits. Otherwise, we're all going to run out of anybody to talk to. And also, there's the whole issue of location. How are we getting on with remote working and what's happening with that? Anyway, enough of me. We'll go over to, that's funny, I thought Councillor Dan Ledger wanted to speak, but he seems to have dropped off my radar.
I did put my hand down. Joe covered it. It was on apprenticeship, Chair. So
fine. Okay. Well, you got one supporter, I hope, at least. Fine. On to Councillor Helen Parr.
Thank you. Yes, on apprenticeships, we're some way off achieving the target. So what are we doing to reach the target and improve? That's one question. Paragraph 6.2, long-term absence. I see there is a great increase in days lost for work-related stress. You mentioned personal stress, anxiety and fatigue, but what about the work-related? 8.2, how does our ethnicity data compare with other district councils? And 8.4, the gender pay gap is increasing because more high paid employees are men. Is that why?
Yeah.
What are we doing? Is this what this Grow Our Own work is about?
Yeah, that's part. So shall I answer the latter one first? Yeah, definitely. That the gender pay gap is exactly that. It's not about equal pay, that we're paying different rates for men or women. It's literally that we've got more men in senior roles than we have women. And yes, the Grow Our Own work in terms of developing career pathways, through the reward review, the pay and grading design changes we're looking at, that's also designed to make it easier to progress through the various grades. Obviously, there needs to be opportunities there for people, but yeah, all of that work will be support our gender pay gap reduction, hopefully.
Okay.
In terms of ethnicity, that's the one thing I haven't got. I can check that out. What I have done is compare it with our East Devon population. As a workforce, we're at 1.38% of the workforce of Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds, 1.38% of the workforce, as you mentioned in the report on page 22. For the district, where the last data which I found was 2019, so it's a little bit old, but 1.59% of the district's population is from a Black, Asian, minority ethnic background. So we're slightly under that, and obviously, it'll be interesting to see when the new census data comes through, which I understand is going to be around November time. But that's definitely something I want to look at, and it supports recruitment and retention. So, are there sources of talent out there that we're not tapping into that we could do? So, again, that's a priority area of work that I've agreed with Personnel Committee for me to look at. But the key thing at the minute, my priority for the moment is trying to get this pay and grading review in, so we've got that good sort of fundamentals in there that then we can build on, because that will help us with our employer brand, tapping into new sources of talent, growing our own, all of that sort of stuff. In terms of long-term absence, yes, work-related stress is an issue. We have really robust processes in place for that. So as soon as within HR we're advised, through a doctor's note that somebody has stated that they've got work-related stress, immediately my HR business partners pick that up with the manager if they're not already aware, so that we can make sure that we're putting support in place, we're getting occupational health advice and so on. So that is an issue, and all the things that we do around our happy, healthy here, staff of wellbeing and so on, is all helping to support people with that. But the capacity, I think the demands we've got as an organisation with the capacity pressures we've got, that is a really difficult balancing act at the moment. And finally, apprenticeships. So yes, we are way below target. That's not unusual, to be honest. The government's target is very ambitious. So, and we're required to work towards it. So I would definitely want to see an improvement. It fits completely with our Grow Our Own strategy. But it's getting the opportunities, and I've got lots of managers across the organisation really keen to be involved in this and to use apprenticeships. But also we need to be encouraging people, young people, but apprenticeships for all ages, to come and join the council. So that's where the engagement with the local East Devon schools, for example, the colleges, the universities and so on will help us, again, all that branding, employer branding stuff.
Yeah, thank you very much. The big concern, I think, is the stress of remote working. I'm just hoping that the managers in particular are really keen to encourage people positively as they're working and make contact, because the worst thing that can happen is that somebody works remotely, does a good job and doesn't know what's going on. So I just encourage you, Joe, to do a good job at SMT of enforcing that kind of management behaviour. Councillor David Key.
Thank you, Chair. I was absolutely horrified when Joe actually said the number of vacancies that we have. Now, when in the first 20 years that I was on the district council, people were retiring, and we used to see them retiring and such. But I haven't seen that many people actually notificate or being notified of retirement. We've seen one or two, and I'm just concerned and would like to know why we have so many vacancies now and why we have difficulty in actually applying or getting people to apply for jobs.
Yeah.
I have my own opinion, but I just wondered if there was anything that you could throw a light on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So on page 13 of the report, we've included the information that we had for the last financial year about reasons for leaving. So that's the voluntary turnover piece. So that includes resignations and retirements. And yeah, retirements is one factor. So last year we had 6 people who retired. So that's definitely one factor. But the highest ones that we knew about, and it's really difficult to get reasons for leaving because it's all dependent, other than knowing the people who have resigned, actually why they've resigned is really difficult. We're trying to encourage, staff to provide that information via the exit form and interviews that we do, but obviously they're not obliged to. But the top 2 that we knew about was better salary and a change of career. And obviously the better salary thing, again, anecdotally, we know that neighbouring councils have been paying better rates than we have. Other employers have been paying better rates, but different private sector and so on. So that's a key reason why we've got this reward review currently happening, that we look at pay rates and try and improve that. Having said that, it's unprecedented times. I've been working in HR 25 odd years now, and I've never seen the climate like it is in terms of the level of vacancies across the economy, and all organisations, all HR managers are struggling with this in terms of how can we get the people through the door. We're doing all sorts of different things. Obviously the pay is one bit, but things like how we improve our social media to attract people, to promote our job adverts. We're looking at in fact, we're looking at the moment about a sort of video that we can use in social media and on websites and things like that. Trying all sorts of different things. Really, we've got a referral scheme, so employees who refer somebody they know who's then successfully appointed can get a small bonus payment. So things like that. We're promoting really staff helpers here. Sell the benefits of working for East Devon and so on. Trying everything we can, and I think that's all we can do in the current climate. It's really, really frustrating and hard to try and resolve this.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'd just like to make a proposal from the chair, recommendation, and that is to express Scrutiny's concern about the turnover rate and the difficulty with recruitment, to express our confidence in Jo Fellows and the work that she's doing, and to ask for this issue to come back in the autumn to check on improvements. Those in favour, would you please just raise the, sorry, I'm having trouble myself, raise the little ticks.
Chair, could I suggest that as they're things for noting rather than actions, can we do them not as recommendations? Then it avoids somebody having to make a senior officer decision to implement them. That we note them and they go into the minutes and the forward plan, but they don't become recommendations. Just because they don't need a senior because of the consultative nature of the meeting. It's just a technical lawyer's point. So vote on it by all means, but that they don't go forward as recommendations that need to be followed up by a decision.
I think it is an issue that needs to be followed up by the main cabinet.
Mm-hmm. So it will go into the minutes.
Yeah.
If you want to leave them as recommendations, do it. It creates a paper trail for something that is effectively things for noting. But if you'd rather do it that way, then we can do that.
If you don't mind, I would. Thank you very much. How are we doing on the voting?
Chair, there's 5 green ticks in favour.
Any against?
No, none against, no abstentions. 7
Right.
green ticks now.
So that's carried. Anybody else got any other comments, recommendations that they want to make? I can't see any hands going up. Good. In which case, Joe, thank you so much for that rapid gallop through everything. There's no lack of support for you. It's purely that our very deep concern is to make sure that we've got enough staff and qualified staff to do the job. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're free. Right. I'd like to move now to agenda item 10 and to look at the quarterly performance report. And I had a number of concerns in regard of that, but I don't want to hog the discussion. So first of all, would anybody like to make any comments on the performance report? All right, fine. Well, let me take it from the top. In the homelessness and housing element, page 32, there are a number of East Devon properties used for homelessness. The trouble is we've got something like 1,022 homelessness applications, and that is a very heavy homelessness problem that seems to be happening. I'll come back to some of the other things. I'd just like to call in Helen if you want to speak. Helen Parr.
Thank you, Chairman. Planning appeals, we can see that there's a comment about committee decisions and householder refusals. What can be done about that? First thing. In the performance indicators about better homes, I see that the households living in temporary accommodation is up. Are we able to improve on that at all? And stage 2 complaints, what is the target? There's no target there. I can't understand whether they're up or whatever.
Okay. Is there anybody present who can answer those questions? I see Councillor Arnott, Councillor Ledger, Councillor Jeff Young are all there. Councillor Arnott.
Yes, if Councillor Parr wants to write to you, Chair, with her question, I'll make sure it's answered by an officer. We don't seem, I think, to have any planning team officers here tonight. No, we don't. Thank you.
Yes, it is a bit of a problem not to have planning officers, because apparently 41% of appeals get overturned. That's a very high number, and I'm very concerned that there are no immediate mitigations. The second thing is that in terms of enforcement numbers, the results aren't evident in terms of numbers there. Now, I know Councillor Ledger and Councillor Arnott are responsible for the strategic planning area. Councillor Ledger just gave it over to Councillor Arnott. And I'm just wondering whether or not there is any training needed for our members to improve the actual situation. Obviously, they don't want to pick up that particular hot potato.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in. I was waiting for you to call us.
Yeah,
I was waiting for somebody to put their hand up, and I didn't see that. Sorry, Dan.
So just regards with your first point on appeals being overturned, that's really a conversation that needs to be had with the planning committee itself. I don't think that any blame could be put at the floor of the officers on that point. It's completely in the gift of the committee on what they pass and what they don't pass. So if they go against an officer's recommendation and then that goes to appeal and is overturned, then that's the fault of the committee. It's not the fault of any officer. And yeah, you're going to see it as a KPI, as a red tick in the box, but at no point should that ever be any issue for any officers. It just means that probably the planning committee might need a bit more training.
Well, I'm sorry, Dan, I did really choose my words very carefully about that when I was saying I think maybe there is an issue in terms of training for the councillors. I certainly was wondering, and maybe Councillor Arnott or yourself can tell me, or maybe we need to ask the data from Ed Freeman, but I don't know how many of those appeals were lost because the committee went against officer recommendations. And I think that's a very important statistic that isn't in the performance review, and maybe it would be better to put it in so that we don't ask daft questions. Any thoughts, Paul?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I absolutely agree with what you just said, and with what Councillor Ledger has just said. The decisions flow from the politically balanced planning committee. And it may be, I'm looking around for who here is on that committee. I can see Councillor Key, who I know has been on it for years. Maybe they'd like to comment, but I have been aware, just as an observer of those committees, of a few decisions that have gone against officer advice. So perhaps when it comes to appeal, it's hardly surprising. But I think possibly an input from members of the, if you think it's relevant now, Chair, members of the planning committee itself may help us with our understanding.
Yes, Councillor David Key, you want to chip in?
Yes, Chair. Right now, I mean, I've been on the planning committee now for coming up 24 years. Now, a lot of these applications that actually go to appeal, not necessarily are against the officer's recommendation, because there are a lot of times when the committee agree with the officer's recommendation, and normally the appeals are for ones that have been refused. And I would like to say, in actual fact, that a lot of them that have been refused have been agreed by the planning committee with the officer's recommendation. So I don't think that that is quite correct, that the ones between that are perhaps where the planning committee has gone against the officer wouldn't be any more than what it is where the actual planning committee agree with the officer. So I think really it would be beneficial, I think, if we actually got figures from Ed Freeman, because I think possibly that there is more appeals where the committee agree with the officer on refusal, and that is then when the applicant goes to appeal.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I think we've got an interesting discussion here. Helen Parr, Councillor Helen Parr, you're on the committee, I believe.
No, I'm no longer on the committee, Sharon,
Right.
but I just want to say that I raised this point because it is a point made in the officer comment under the performance indicator.
Yeah. Councillor Paul Arnott, you want to come back?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair, for indulging me, especially as I'm not actually on this committee. I agree with you. I think it would be worth asking Ed And it might well be worth asking Councillor Ragg as well, who's now in her third year chairing the planning committee, for her anecdotal evidence of what she's seen going through there. I think Councillor Key is right. I mean, the problem clearly isn't the planning committee working incredibly hard trying to make the best decisions as they see it for people in East Devon. It is unfortunately the national planning policy framework, isn't it? And every now and then a decision will be made that is marginal, that is perhaps to turn something down, and the applicant knows that if they appeal, they'll get it. I think from my time on the planning committee, officers were excellent at warning us if that was likely to be the case, and mostly that advice was heeded as well. Thanks, Jeff.
My presumption in all of this would be that we need a bit more information rather than to in any way try and allocate blame. Nobody is trying to do that on this committee, and I hope that we're trying to be as constructive as possible. It would be of great help to know the balance of what proportion of those applications that were lost came through delegated, came through chairman's committee, and came through the actual committee, and how many of those on the actual committee where the committee went against the officer. So that if we could just get some of that information, and I'd be very happy to defer to Councillor Arnott as to how we should take that information. Should it come back here, do you think? Should it come to strategic planning?
Chair, just on a point of information, on page 32, it does state that the development manager is looking into it at the moment, and once complete, a report will be presented to the planning and strategic planning committees with the findings and any lessons learned.
Well, I think that would be extremely useful, and maybe that information could be conveyed back to this committee in due course, since we raised the concern too. Right, in terms of any other topics, did either both Councillor Arnott and Councillor Ledger have their hand up? So you've already spoken. Do you mind if I just call in Councillor Bruce?
Thank you, Chair. I would support all the suggestions you just put forward. Might be worth adding one extra one. If it's at all possible, it would be useful to get some idea of how other councils around us are performing in comparison to those suggestions that you put forward, so that we have a better view of how we sit within our southwest area, region, when it comes to these kind of planning issues.
Thank you. Would Councillor Arnott be prepared to pick that up?
Oh, yep, absolutely. Happy to do so.
Thank you very much. Right, well, we'll move on to anything else to do with the report. And anybody else want to chip in any particular comments? Because I have a list. No? All right, well, I'll carry on down my list. In Better Homes, page 34, it would be appropriate, I think, to say congratulations to John Golding and the housing team under their time with Councillor Megan Armstrong, because last financial year the social housing decarbonisation grant of £614,000 came into East Devon, and the Heat Network Investment Programme gained further money. So this looks like the whole agenda to improve our housing stock and our reduction of carbon is very much in line and very much what we want. Interesting on page 34, Val Ranger did have some questions on the Manor Pavilion and parking, but she hasn't arrived, so I'm just relaying her concerns that the issues in the locality of Sidmouth with regard to that parking is still a big concern, and maybe we'll come back to it when she's in the present, so that she can ask her question and we can discuss it. In terms of greeneries, Devon, 400 fly tippings, that's a large number, but there is no evidence presented in the report of anything that in the way of prosecutions. And I wondered if any of our cabinet members had any information about how many prosecutions we've managed to achieve to avoid this kind of fly tipping. Sorry, Councillor Dan Ledger wanted to say something.
The only point I was going to come back in on, Chair, is just to correct you on the heat network investment programme. As fantastic as John Golding and the housing team are, that's actually thanks to Andy Wood's team and Naomi Harnett for, and that is months, probably years worth of work that they need to be thanked for. I just wouldn't. I'd hate to see it getting put into the wrong place. That's all.
Well, can we amend the minutes to congratulate the right people, please, Sarah? Because obviously that was a tremendous win, and we want them to be properly recognised for it. Thank you. So, fly tippings. Anybody got any information about enforcements? Prosecutions, rather. Councillor Jeff Young.
Yeah, I haven't got. Sorry, I haven't got any information on the amount of prosecutions, but the figures are fairly comparable with previous years. And when I speak to officers, they consider that there is nothing untoward with the number of fly tipping. It's continuous problem, and we cope with it as best we can. But if you want the numbers, I can provide all councillors with that tomorrow, if you wish.
It would be useful to have it in the report on a quarterly basis, yes. But if you want to present it to all councillors, then that would be extremely valuable just this once. When we look at the amount of recycling, despite COVID, what a tremendous result. So if Councillor Jeff Young could just bring our congratulations to the whole of the team that did that work. Amazing that they kept going. And huge numbers of plantings, tremendous. But what really intrigued me was on page 35, where we have wilding of Exmouth and Honiton, and we have beavers and even a Honiton Gruffalo trail. I didn't realise Honiton had so many strange animals wandering around. Sorry, I'm rattling on. Maddie Chapman wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I seem to remember at one of the Scrutiny Committee meetings, I think it was John Golding, or it could have been Matt Hancock, it could have been someone else. We were talking about fly tipping, and we said, was it because the builders that were doing work, sort of small jobs, etc., rather than pay the money up at the tip, would go and dump it out on the common and roundabout. And the officers were going to speak to County Council and you know, the other authorities to try and cut that down so that we didn't have fly tipping, and they were going to do that, and I haven't heard any more about it. So I don't know whether it's the cost to the small builder taking things up to the tip and having to pay because it's building material in his van. And is that why they're still fly tipping? Because we did say, you know, getting our guys to go out and clear up when you could sort of cut down what the builder would be charged at the tip would actually cut our costs as well. And that was moved forward at one point, but I don't know what's happened. I don't know if anyone can help me there. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jeff Young.
Yeah, there's no correlation between the charges at the household tips, which goes back, I think, 8 years now they've been charging. And there hasn't been any dramatic increase in the fly tipping. Not even when the household recycling centres were closed down during the first part of COVID. Fly tipping didn't increase that much, and we put it down to the lazy people that do fly tipping continue to do it, and that number hasn't changed over the years very much. And there's no proof that charging at these household waste centres has made that difference. Devon County also consider have looked at it, and they don't believe that there's any correlation. The government the government that was anyway have suggested that the charges at the household recycling centres should be removed to help with the fly tipping, but our estimation is no, it wouldn't make any difference. People are the lazy ones would continue to be lazy.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And that's sad, but unfortunately human nature. That's why I was concerned that we had some stats on what prosecutions, because the only thing I can think of is that prosecutions being publicised might help defer people. Just to go on very briefly then, on page 35 to 36 on resilient economy, there's some excellent reports on the successes of the Science Park, Sky Park, and the Long Lane development and Power Park development, and lots of good progress on Cranbrook and so on. I think our concern, and the reason that we've asked for a report on coastal and rural areas, is that it seems like a huge amount of money and effort has gone into the West End, which absolutely was the plan for the last 10, 20 years. But we are losing a bit of traction in the coastal and rural towns and rural areas. And that's primarily because we're not really sure what's going on. So we've asked for a report to come back from Economic Development team. I just want to say that the West End is doing superbly well in terms of attracting the right kind of employment, but that isn't sufficient to stop the wage problem. We need more high wage income throughout the whole of East Devon. Councillor Arnott, you wanted to say something?
Thank you, Chair, very much. Yes, so two questions here. One I was going to raise later, but I'll raise it in a moment. So obviously in terms of economy, you may be aware that there's a Levelling Up Fund bid live now for Seaton and Axminster. So that's there. So I don't think it would be to characterise it as nothing happening for either a coastal or a rural market town there. And I think the second thing I'd want to say, and it's perhaps at the later agenda item, Chair, is that I note from your forward plan that you have made a chair's decision effectively to call a number of portfolio holders over the months. So that's of interest. And if you want to deal with this now, please do, or later, then I'm happy to come back to this later. But I think we want to understand more from you as chair how those items are going to be run. And I'm going to be frank with you, Chair, and this isn't your fault, but portfolio holders have appeared before this committee before, where the chair of committee was getting suggestions for the next question from his offstage wife. So I'm pretty certain that Mrs. Allen isn't going to have to do that, or that indeed you tolerate it. But I do need to understand the atmosphere into which my portfolio holders are coming. And I would think, I hope, there will be an atmosphere of respect where the intention of the process is not to try and throw in surprise questions at a portfolio holder, which is exactly what happened before, but there's a constructive engagement. So I'd just like to ask you how you see that process going. I can see it's not the current agenda item, but maybe we might talk about it later.
Since you've raised the issue, Councillor Arnott, the whole thrust of my first announcements in regard of the chairmanship and in regard of the agenda proposal form and in terms of the forward plan is to be a constructive, critical friend. Nothing more. I've tried to stress how much we should be looking to suggest improvements and work together as a committee in a relatively friendly atmosphere. We had a bit of a discussion about whether we should use first names or not. That didn't seem a big issue for me. It did for one or two people. But as far as I'm concerned, the whole thrust of this committee is a legal necessity to be a critical friend and talk to each portfolio holder through the year to find out whether there are things that we can review and improve on and come up with constructive suggestions. Would you like to come back?
No, I'll take that as your personal assurance, Councillor Allen, that as it will be done henceforth is not how it has been done in the past. And I will, if you may, hold you to that. Thank you.
You're very welcome to hold me to that. I hope we can do the same at Main Council. Thank you for that. Councillor Jack Rowland.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Arnott touched on the subject I was going to talk about anyway, about the Axe Valley levelling up bid. I just wanted to point out as well that the original deadline for submitting that bid was yesterday, but the government pulled the plug on that deadline date due to IT issues with the portal, apparently. So we're desperately waiting to hear what the new deadline date will be, bearing in mind as well that there's a new levelling up minister now in charge who probably needs to get up to date with what the whole process is. So we're desperately waiting to hear about that process. Just touching, I was going to be talking because we've got a subject on the agenda later on, the last item about the forward plan.
Yes, and can we hold any comments to then?
Yeah,
the forward plan.
I'm quite happy to do that until we get to that agenda item, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Councillor Dan Ledger.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back in on your points really about us being very, well, your assertion that it was very West End centric. And I think everyone can agree about the amount of money that we're able to spend in the West End due to the enterprise zone designation and being able to utilise future business rates from that area. Not only does that, and then also being able to offer reduced rates for businesses within that, you'd have thought, well, it would be an assumption that that's where a key area of the council's activity from an economic point of view would be. If we're looking at the wider scope, we need to look at where the funding and the money is coming from. And then that leads into what Councillor Rowland and Councillor Arnott's just said with the levelling up bids and trying to tap into government funds. I know it was one of the Simon Jupp's election promises that he would get funding for Exmouth Town and High Street. And we need to keep pushing it. I know a bid's gone in through Devon County, but we need to keep pushing to try and get the funding in our towns and centres. It was in 2019, there was a TAF was created for the future high streets with Councillor Hartnell was made chair of it. But I don't believe, I think through COVID and through workload that wasn't taken forward, and we never had a meeting for that. So it could be an assertion from this committee that is looked into again, and that's resurrected.
Yes, I think the entire issue of economic development is not just dependent on government grants and bidding for them. And it's a whole really mixed agenda, and it was just important to make sure that we review it. There are concerns, even if you don't feel them, there are concerns that we are spending a vast amount of money quite correctly at the West End, but not enough in other areas. And I understand why, but that's not exactly the point. The point is, should we have a look at it? And yes, I think we should have a look at it, purely because that is the legal responsibility of scrutiny. I'm just going to go to agenda item 11 if everybody's in agreement, because that's where
I did have my hand up again.
Well,
terribly sorry.
I know, but we've gone to the stage of actually talking about the forward plan. So could you?
Yep.
Could we just look at the forward plan? What I want to look at very briefly, with Councillor Paul Miller asked if we could have a look at a simpler form for putting forward proposals for items for consideration by the Scrutiny Committee, which you've got in front of you as that agenda item. It's a simplified version of one which is also used, a checklist which has also been used here before. And the principle here is that if we use this form, which should simplify the committee and anybody really putting forward agenda suggestions, that it could be voted on in terms of principle, and then officers could scope it, and the large scoping form could come back to the chair and vice chair for screening to make sure it's in line with the decision of the committee. The problem we've had in the past is that it has to go through 2 cycles of decision making, and therefore it's at least 3 months and maybe longer before an item can be dealt with, which seems really an extended length of time. So I've been trying to work out how we could do it more simply, and that's the recommendation. Councillor Maddie Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I've been on scrutiny for many, many years. And the one thing that really bugs me with this form is what would you like the outcome to be? And in all our scrutiny training, it is not a question of what, when you submit something, what you want as an individual, the outcome to be. The idea of scrutiny is if a member something is brought to a member's attention by residents or anything like that, and you think, well, I don't know, maybe we should bring this to scrutiny and ask the officers and ask our colleagues, well, what do you think? Do you think this is right, or do you think this is wrong? It is not up for the individual to say what you want the outcome to be. So I don't understand why we have that on the form, because it is not up to the individual, it is up to the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, I have made that comment myself. Anybody else want to make a comment? Well, given that, what do you propose to do, Maddie?
Well, if something is worrying a councillor, or a group of residents, and we think, well, we don't understand why this is not perhaps going the way that we think it should, or what is happening, and we ask the officers, and we put it forward, and the officers scope it and say, we can see why you've got a concern here. We need to talk about it, and we'll explain to you what has happened or what we need to do. It is not up to an individual councillor to put forward, yeah, well, I want this scrubbed, or I think this is wrong. It is not up to the individual councillor. It is up to the committee and the council to decide these things, and therefore to ask a single councillor for their point of view on something to go to scrutiny seems to me to be a very defeatist. Because I think if I put something forwards, yes, I have a personal view on it, but I want to hear what my colleagues think about it, which is what scrutiny is, and it should be non-political scrutiny. It is just scrutinising the work done by the council, and if there is a problem, asking officers, could you please explain, how this has worked out the way it has? It is not up to me to tell my colleagues, well, this is wrong, because I don't know all the facts until it is brought to scrutiny and all the facts are put before us. But that is my view.
Okay, I don't disagree. Councillor Megan Armstrong, you had a view. Are you there, Megan?
Sorry, Mike. My screen just froze. I didn't realise you'd brought me up. Yeah, it was just a quick one, really. I know I'm outside the committee, but I agree with what Maddie says. It just makes common sense to me, really, is that perhaps just the word, it needs to be reworded or something, so that it's not made as an individual, or perhaps that sentence should be scrapped. I'm not really sure, but I agree that it shouldn't be just left up to the comments or the suggestions from an individual councillor. I don't think. That's all I want to say. Yeah.
Thanks, Megan. I'm in total agreement. So I propose to simply take out the word outcome so that it will read as, please describe as precisely as possible what you would like to see achieved. We're not specifying then that we want to see an outcome. We're perhaps wanting information. We're perhaps wanting clarification of policy. That's what we're really looking to do, to try and improve things. We're not dictating what the result should be.
Thank you, Chair.
Happy with that?
I'm happy with that.
Right. Anybody opposed to that? Fine. I'll take that as read, and that's what we'll do. So please, Sarah, could you just delete the word outcome from that particular question, and then we'll go ahead with that particular form. Now, Councillor Arnott wanted to come in on an issue, and I'm not sure what it was. So perhaps, Paul, you could outline what the problem was.
I'm just booking you for Cabinet next week, Mike, the 13th, where I hope you'll enjoy the item on culture strategy and action plan for East Devon. And that is around, this is basically covering the economy issue that you were mentioning earlier. So the key part of a culture strategy, which hooks in with the tourism strategy, it comes in 5 very, very brief bullet points. It's to attract visitors, to create jobs and develop skills, to attract and retain businesses, to revitalise places, and to develop talent. So I hope if you come along to that, you'll see that there is a real vision. That is a different part of the economy, but I just wanted to go. I'm going to your point, your excellent point you made earlier about middle to higher value employment opportunities around here, and it looks as if in the culture and tourism sector there is potential for real economic growth in that. And as an administration, all that we have done, all the thinking around tourism and culture, the absolute first principle before at the beginning of any document is it's all about the economy. And that's the thing. I just hope that might reassure you there is some panny step and work going on. Thank you for letting me come back on that in entirely the inappropriate agenda item, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Jack Rowland.
Thanks, Chair. Two things to do with the forward plan. I attended the last Scrutiny Committee when you mentioned about portfolio holders coming in front of scrutiny, and I said personally I have no problems at all with that. So I actually welcome it. On a specific, I noticed in the forward plan in February of 23, you mentioned under Councillor Young's portfolio, car parks and parking. That does need amending now, because now that Andrew Ennis has left, John Symes in finance has taken over responsibility for car parks, which means it now falls in my portfolio. So perhaps you'd like to amend that part of the forward plan.
Okay, thank you very much, Jack. We certainly amend that. Sarah, if you could. Anyone else want to talk to the forward plan? Councillor Paul Miller.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, I wanted to thank you, Chair, for making sure the forward plan has become nice and full. I think in the past it's been pretty light, so it's good to have a forward agenda. My second point, and I'd love to be corrected on this, because it was my understanding following some training I had, I don't think it's a choice of portfolio holders to attend meetings by the Scrutiny Committee. I actually thought that was actually enshrined in law through the overview and scrutiny. There's a law I read anyway on some training I did, so I don't actually think it's a choice. And thirdly, I wanted to come in on what Councillor Chapman mentioned. I would probably take what she said further and state that I really think these forms that we have and the way we process them, and we wait, we wait for a month to have the forms to consider whether we'll do an inquiry, then it takes months for a report. To me, it feels very bureaucratic. I think if the Scrutiny Committee wants to have an inquiry, they can decide to have an inquiry without going through this process where we spend, half an hour, 45 minutes deciding whether we want to do something in a public meeting. And I think, to be honest, I mentioned this in the last meeting, but if you look at other councils, and I don't mean county council, I mean other district councils and middle tier councils, I don't see them doing what we're doing, which is, in my view, I don't know whether it's a delaying tactic, whether it's deliberate or accidental, but it just, to me, it just slows things down. And I used the example last time of just how long it took to get a report on Alderman Humphreys to the Scrutiny Committee. I mean, that was 7-8 months. And, we just need to be a lot quicker, in my view. So, and I think the forms, I understand they're well-meaning, but I personally don't understand why we have this process where they come to the Scrutiny Committee for the committee to decide whether to go ahead with it. I just think it takes an enormously long time, and it's sort of, we're going to get to the end of the council term soon. So I personally would scrap it. But thanks very much, Chair, for letting me speak.
Okay, thank you, Paul. The reason that the new form is before you and will be used from now on is to simplify the whole thing, so that anybody, including members of the rest of the council, even to the town councils, parishes, and even a member of the general public, can put a proposal in, and we can then decide whether or not scrutiny should do anything. And secondly, it may not be scrutiny that actually does an investigation. It may be that scrutiny says it should go to somewhere else. So we're trying to make sure that scrutiny fulfills its proper obligations to be a voice for the community in the widest possible sense, a voice for improving functional things inside the council. It's not there to create political controversy.
Chair, very briefly, I want to agree with you, but I also just wanted to say, why can't Why can't the committee just agree to launch an inquiry via email? Why does it have to come to a meeting? Do you know what I mean? I just don't understand. You know, when I worked in Parliament, select committees would decide to do an inquiry themselves. You don't. I just see it as just exhaustive having an agenda item of 45 minutes deciding what you're going to do in a public session. I just don't think it's necessary, and I'm not disagreeing with you, Chair, about what you've just said. I don't think it's not about political controversy. It's just about getting inquiries, you know, underway quickly rather than waiting a month or two to get them even started, let alone getting a report. Anyway, it's just a suggestion.
Yeah. Constitutionally, we have to have a mechanism. This is the simplest mechanism I can think of to enable something to get onto the table for scrutiny to decide. Simple as that. Dan Ledger, Councillor Dan Ledger.
Thanks, Chair. It's just really a query on the forward plan. So, just for instance, taking my own portfolio on the 1st of December. Are we going to get a wider brief than that closer to the meeting time? It's just I could tell you the state of homes, the amount of complaints, the cost of heat pumps, the amount of grants that we got for the heat pumps, and the housing numbers that we refurbished pretty much off the top of my head. So
yes, okay, we will clarify in advance, well in advance, so that you can, and as a portfolio holder, each portfolio holder can thoroughly understand that we're not trying to trap them, we're simply trying to catch up, and we'll make sure that it's a clear brief so that you know what you're walking into.
No, I'm happy for it to be as wide as you like, Chair. It's just, I think it'd be a very short meeting if it was only those 3 points.
Okay, you've asked for it. Sorry, Councillor Paul Arnott.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate how difficult it is for you to set this agenda with the portfolio holders so far ahead. I completely agree with Councillor Rowland and with Councillor Miller that obviously the Cabinet is very happy to come as a scrutiny and legally must. I was just looking at the 8th of September as an example. So you've got Paul and Jack. Makes a lot of sense on asset use, costs and income. So Paul could give you a 5-hour lecture on the history and the current state of East Devon assets and their various contracts and the issues. And that is a huge issue, and he's been spending massive amount of time on it. He's incredibly able in many ways. He can certainly talk about coastal economy issues, of course. Things like food and farming, if I'm really honest with you, I don't think we do a lot of that at the moment. That is something that's mainly led through either, obviously, a county. You've got the county-owned farms. You've got, well, you did have Neil Parish, but you've got MPs trying to help with the position post leaving the EU for farmers. But I'm just dropping that thought in there about, and I think you've just said it, haven't you, Chair? Which is just to distill it a bit more, think through what it is they can actually answer, what work it is they actually do, and in terms of, I do just pick that as an example. In terms of work with the farming community, there is stuff that the council deals with. There's stuff in relation to planning applications and changes of use and all that kind of thing. But we don't have any fiscal responsibility for local farming. We must make the right noises in support. I'm just seeing that as an example, Chair, and we've got plenty of time before September to kind of, distill it a bit or add in.
I think one of the problems has surfaced recently since that was put on the agenda, because the LEP has shut down some of the particular approaches it's working on with regard to farming productivity and other activities. Now that in the situation of the Ukraine war and the damage to supply chains may not be the very best situation to face. In that situation, maybe we should look at it very urgently as to see whether or not this council has an attitude as to what should be happening in terms of actions in partners as much as inside our own remit. So that's just an example. But I do thank you for your guidance, and I will make sure that we sharpen up. Councillor Jake Bonetta.
Can I, Chair, just come in very quickly? I omitted to mention gates of plates on your own patch in Holleston, which is, of course, something that we do support. But thank you.
Yeah, I was well aware of it because I helped start it. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief point, and I must say before I say anything, I do heed to the absolutely to the much greater knowledge on this sort of thing, select committees, overview committees, etc., to Paul Miller, who has had a long experienced career in Parliament already, and is very experienced in these sorts of things. However, I do feel, I do agree with pretty much everything that people are saying here. However, I do think we are going a little bit off course. I think when we look at other local authorities, many local authorities, for example, I think of Exeter City Council, which actually has 2 separate scrutiny committees. And then you go to Devon County Council, who have SIRS, and they also have adult social care scrutiny as well. They do serve with regular input and regular questions to portfolio holders. It is part and parcel of what they do. Legislation aside, I couldn't quote any specific legislation off the top of my head. It is customary, and it is a thing that does happen. So whether or not the specific sort of question aims that we've got down at the moment are correct or should be, or whether they are sort of set in stone or not, I'm not really concerned about. I do, however, completely support the idea of portfolio holders coming to scrutiny, not only for the benefit of the Scrutiny Committee, but also for the benefit of members of the public in terms of being able to ask those questions to councillors, as well as obviously council members through the Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to close things down. All I want to stress, and I'll come back to Maddie and Helen, and that will be the last 2 speakers. What happened was we had a very cosy scrutiny committee when it was managed by the ruling party. We then put in place somebody who was in the opposition, but used that in a particular way that became quite controversial. We now are in a situation where I'm very much trying to stick to the letter of the real objectives of scrutiny. And that's why at the bottom of that form, you'll find both the constitutional requirements of scrutiny and an indication of the powers that scrutiny has. And I would stress, we are trying to be constructive. That's our aim, and I hope that we can all go along with that. Maddie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, now my understanding is scrutiny should talk to portfolio holders. Anything that we don't understand, we can ask them. We can ask them what they think is a problem. We can understand better what their jobs are and what is going forward, what scrutiny can recommend be put in place to assist them. It is not all negative. Scrutiny can call any officer or any portfolio holder to a committee. As I understand it, that is the law. But it is not negative. As elected members, we should know, working for the council, what the problems are, what the portfolio holder has problems with, and if something is done and we don't understand it, then we can say to the portfolio holder, well, why have you done this? You know, could you have done it that way or that way? You know, just explain to us. It is not a negative or some sort of hunt you know, scrutiny should be non-political, and politics should not be brought into it at all. It is looking at the work of the council and the jobs that different councillors do and officers do in it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Maddie. Scrutiny is not apolitical, but it doesn't have to be ultra-political. And I think that's the thrust of which I think we're trying to establish a new way of working. Helen, last one.
Yes, I'd like to just ask that we receive a report, whatever the portfolio holder thinks are the important points about his work, that could be emailed around before the meeting so that we're all informed of what they do, and we can base our questions on that report, or if we think there's something, a large gap in that report, we can ask about it. But I think this would give us a structure to the meeting.
Good. That's excellent.
I'd like to propose that, Chairman.
Right. Precisely what are you proposing?
Chair, could I just jump? Can I jump in as well, and in line with the proposal? We've got a number of portfolio holders on the September forward plan, and this is of course the last meeting before that meeting. So picking up the discussion from Councillor Ledger, I wonder if the committee want to just enlarge what exactly it is they're looking for from those portfolio holders, so that it meets the committee's expectation and in line with Councillor Parr's proposal.
I think at nearly 8:30 at night, it's rather difficult for us to come up with that briefing. So I will very happily listen to anybody who wants to email me as to that particular set in September, and I will clarify in each case precisely what we're wanting. But Helen, I'm not sure what you were proposing, so I need you to be clear again as to what you said so that we can actually vote on it.
Okay, I'm proposing that the portfolio holders are to write reports on whatever matters of their portfolio they think are of interest, or important current matters, whatever they decide, that can be circulated to the members of the committee, or all councillors, in fact, and that would make a framework for us to ask questions of the portfolio holders. And then if there are large gaps, obviously we can ask them about the missing stuff. But I think it would give us a frame if we had some report circulated in advance from each portfolio holder before the meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I partially agree with the direction of travel of Councillor Parr, but I think it is up to the committee to frame the questions that they wish to have answered. And then it is possible, I suppose, that a portfolio holder could address those in advance. But otherwise, all we're going to get is what I did on my holidays. I mean, if you wanted me to write a report about what I do at the moment, I can give you a, I don't know, 300 or 400 page document if you want. So I think it is for scrutiny to refine that, and I think that would be helpful if you could, consider that, Chair, over the next sort of couple of weeks over the early summer, exactly what it is you want. But I think the other thing we have to bear in mind is we as an administration want to be scrutinised as rigorously as you want. I think we have to be very frank that we are short on officer time at the moment because we are under-resourced, and we know this is another issue. We have problems with recruitment, as do all parts of the public sector and private sector across the entire country. So I'm worried about something that starts generating yet another report. I have been advised in the past, I did actually once suggest to the CEO that I'd quite like to bring a report to Cabinet, and he told me, I don't think that's a very good idea. Reports are written by officers. So, I think all of that would need to be thought through, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, totally agree. Councillor Megan Armstrong, last one.
I'm really sorry. I know you didn't want anybody else to speak, really, but it's just that when I did this for the Scrutiny Committee a couple of years ago, and I seem to remember, I wrote a report with the help of one or two officers and explained everything that was in my portfolio. And it was pages and pages and pages long. And I think I sent it out. I'm looking at Helen now. I think I sent it out beforehand, didn't I? Yeah, so that just what Helen said about so that you could then have a good chance to look at it beforehand and then get your questions ready. Most of which I seem to remember, but at least I did.
That was very good.
Officers, yeah. So that it's that kind of idea, and so it's everything that you do in your portfolio basically, and what the issues are. I mean, to me, it's quite simple, really. You just point out what happens and what your concerns are, and then it's up for discussion. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think the reaction to your discussion, Megan, was that Councillor Paul Arnott was very concerned for the welfare of his portfolio holders. What I'm trying to do is to make sure that we have the proper scrutiny and minimise the effort that is put into it. I'm very aware that too many committees get cancelled because reports can't get developed in time. Personnel and poverty panel are two examples. But you can see that by bringing them to scrutiny, it was perfectly possible for those discussions to be had. As far as I'm concerned, I think circulating a set of briefing in advance of a meeting, which is what Helen is suggesting, is perfectly reasonable so long as it doesn't weigh down a huge amount of work on the portfolio holders or the officers concerned. And frankly, it should all be in the annual plan. It's supposed to be there in the first place. So it should be just an update running through all of those issues if that's what we want. As far as I'm concerned, it should be very simple and clear and easy. And I'm quite happy, Jack, if you want to say something, but I'd rather see if the rest of the committee now have an opinion about Helen's proposal. Do you want to say anything, Jack?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know if you were inviting me or saying you.
Yes, I did invite you. It might have been vague.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, personally, I have no problem about providing a report. I mean, I have a cross-party informal finance panel anyway, and I did find it a little bit ironic that I'm not going to get political about this, but members of a certain party were throwing their arms up in the air saying, no, we want officers present at this and we want everything minuted and what have you, which was rather just taking away the object of what I was trying to achieve at the time by having informal cross-party finance panel meetings. So I'm happy to still carry on with those because I think they're beneficial because it does help with people's understanding. And I'm also happy to provide reports. I just think we need to be clear as well about what period of times we're covering, whether we're always starting from the start of the financial year and always updating it, or whether we're talking about a specific period of time as well. But that can come down to the individual portfolio holder's judgment, and we'll see how we go with it.
Right. Helen, do you want to carry on with your proposal? Do you want a second anybody prepared to
Yes.
second this proposal?
I'm happy to second that, Councillor Bonetta.
Right. So we need to take your suggestion to a vote. And Sarah, perhaps you could, or Anita, you could take us through the process.
Thank you. If members of the committee could just indicate with, thank you, green ticks for yes. I have 6 green ticks, Chair. No red crosses, no abstentions.
Fine. Well, that's an accepted proposal. And frankly, I am delighted with the general tenor of the meeting now. We seem to be getting to a stage where we're willing to cooperate, willing to critique, willing to be friends, and willing to cut the workload. So I hope Anita's happy with that as much as I'm sure Sarah will be. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for contributing, and thank you very much for attending.